Today's lesson is about widows and widowers on Social Security, and it's really about spouse benefits. And why we're talking about this specifically is we've just had two clients that we've been able to help them with their Social Security decisions and really to claim on their deceased spouse. And it's meant a big amount of money to them over their lifetime. And it was pretty significant. And in both cases, the Social Security office had given them what really amounts to incorrect information.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of people that come in having talked to Social Security already and have some preconceived notion of what they're wanting to do with Social Security. And sometimes it's right, and a lot of times it's not quite right. And so Hans oftentimes will say, and I think it's good advice, is that Social Security gives you information. We can give you advice of what to do with that information. And so one of the big takeaways that we want to get across is that Social Security, the administration themselves, is probably not the best place to get your information and advice on where and the strategies to use in terms of filing for Social Security.
So every new client that comes into us, we solve the Social Security problem for them, or at least give them advice as to when to file. And for anybody that's married or been married, the spouse's Social Security benefit is an issue. And it gets a little bit complicated. And then when we do estate planning in these financial plans, we have to deal for a married couple with inevitably that one of them is going to die first. We don't know which one of that's going to be. And then we need to talk about Social Security after that time. So we're dealing with, a widow or a widower issue in all cases, even for single people that have been married in the past. So today's lesson, we're going to zero in, and we've got a couple of examples where I brought both of these clients in, and I was serving them right from the beginning. And then I went to Tom about them, and then ultimately Tom was the one that served them on the Social Security part of the deal. So the first client up here is Sally, and she is 65 and a half now. She came to me about a year ago. She was listening to me on the radio on Finishing Well, and had been for years, and thinking she needed to retire. She wanted to retire. And, first it was what about health insurance and Medicare and how's she going to live and all that kind of stuff. And then she did retire and we put together a plan, but we got in, what happened is that she was a single lady, had been single for many years, and her ex-husband passed away during the financial planning process. And that's when I turned her over to Tom.
Sure. And so when he brought her in, we were talking about all her situation, her finances and things, and he brought up the fact that her ex-husband had passed away. And I said, well, let's stop there for a second. I had run into this previously, and really how I came to know this was an option was actually by accident. I was on the phone with a client and they were asking about Social Security, and they brought up something that their friend had done. And I said, well, that doesn't quite sound right. And I explained the rules to give you guys a little bit of a history lesson. Is back in 2015, Congress passed a law that changed a lot of the strategies around how people were using Social Security. So it used to be that most spouses could do what's called file and suspend or a restricted application. And that law changed it to where anyone born after January 1st, 1954, it removed that as an option. But they preserved the ability for widows or widowers to do that. And so I didn't know that, and this was a couple of years ago when this client was telling me about it. So I got researching, looked into it, and discovered that that's actually, you can still do that. You can file a restricted application where you're only filing for the spousal benefit and not your own benefit if you were born after January 1st of 1954 and you are a widow or a widower filing on the deceased spouse's or ex-spouse's benefit. And so when Hans brought this case in, she was really needing this money and was thinking about, should I take my own Social Security now? Should I wait? By waiting, it grows a little bit more. And I said, well, hold on. We can file for the deceased spouse's benefit, her ex-spouse's benefit because he had since passed, and delay her own check and get a higher amount. And so we have the amounts here. And so at her full retirement age, if she waited to her full retirement age, she would get $1,779 by waiting. And so she was deciding, should I wait till then or should I not?
She pretty much made that decision that she was going to wait to collect.
Right.
And she was just going to live off the 401k and some possible part-time work to do that. And that's when you came in.
Yep. And so what we brought up this strategy of that she could actually file for her spousal benefit off her deceased ex-husband's check. And she actually came back, we proposed this to her, and she came back and fought us a little bit on it. Not aggressively, but she said, I already talked to Social Security. They told me that's not allowed. And I said, I hear you. I know this is true. I've done this with other clients. This will work. And so we went a couple rounds. I did a little convincing, and I said, well, how about this? Let's just try it. If it doesn't work, you can tell them no matter, I don't want to take it. If it does work, you're going to get this check while you're delaying yours. So she agreed. She filed for benefits and was approved. And so now she's getting a check for $1,975, which is higher than what her full retirement benefit would be. And she gets the added benefit that her own check is growing, and as it's earning those delayed retirement credits, where she can wait till 70 and get $2,400 at that point. So not only is she getting a check now, where she wasn't going to get a check because she had decided to wait till full retirement age, she's getting a higher check, and she has the benefit of waiting to receive that higher check from her own record at 70. And so this made a huge difference for her, and she was so thankful that we went through this. And sometimes it really does take us pushing a little bit because they've heard something from Social Security that's just is incorrect. And a lot of the people at Social Security, what they're quoting is that rule that changed where if you were born after 1954, and I'm sure this is what happened, is they looked at her situation, her birth date was after that date, they said you can't do this anymore. And so, make sure you're getting a second opinion when it comes to some complicated strategies like that.
Well, yeah, let's look at the numbers on her again. First of all, she was getting nothing because she would have gotten about $1,500 a month, but she decided to wait a year to go to full retirement age. So that $1,779 was in the future for her with a whole year of not getting a check. Then she filed on the ex-spouse, and she's getting $1,975. And she's going to get that every month, presumably for the rest of her life. But then what's going on, because she filed a restriction application, hers, what would have been the $1,779, is still growing, and it's just going to continue to grow to $2,408. And then when she's right at 70, she's going to file, and she's going to get a raise then. And so what this really means to her is a lot less withdrawals on her 401k to live, and she doesn't have a lot of money in the 401k. We made a big difference for her, and she's so very, very thankful for it. Now, just after we did that about 2 months ago, and by the way, she got a back check. Social Security paid her a few months of the $1,975 in arrears. She was really thankful for that. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Walt. And so Walt is a guy that I met. He watched all these YouTubes, and he gave us a call, and he's interested in financial planning. He's turning 65, going on Medicare, kind of the whole thing is everything else. And then I really had this sense of just profound sadness that I got, even before he told me the story, that his wife passed before COVID hit, but just right in January of 2020. And very sad. And so he was off of work during that time. She was actually getting some Social Security disability benefits for a couple, 3 months back in 2019. And he was able to go back and look at what that check was, which was helpful. And he hadn't even thought about widower benefits at all. Even despite this guy's watched a lot of YouTubes, he's a pretty smart guy, done a lot of researching. And so I'm not going to talk that much about benefits for the wife. And so we're really talking about his situation, how much he's got in his 401k, in his IRA, any pension that he might get. And then who was 64 and a half, he was ready to file for his Social Security 2 years early at $26.43 a month because he hasn't worked since January 2020. I mean, he just did some unemployment during the COVID, and he just hadn't gone back to work. He's been living off of savings. And so he thought, well, I might as well just go ahead and take this $26.43. And even though it's less than I will get, I don't know how long I'm going to live. And I'm just kind of listening to that. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to push him back on that. But I hate to see people giving away lifetime benefits just because they want to get it a little bit early. And so I brought the whole case to Tom because I didn't want to start talking about it because Tom's the expert on this stuff. And so Tom looked at the whole thing, and we did all the math, and we guesstimated that the check that he can start collecting now is as his widower benefit is $1,936, and then he filed a restricted application based upon taking the widower benefit. And so he's not taking this. He's going to get a smaller amount, but his check is going to continue to grow all the way to 70, and he's going to get $38.31 on his own benefit starting at 70, which is 5.5 years from now. I mean, it made a big difference for this guy. And he was able to, he said, let me go on and try to do this online myself, because he already had a My Social Security account, ssa.gov, and he had already, that's where he got these numbers from. And then let me go in and try to do it, and then I'll call you if I need you. And then he asked Tom. Tom said that in the memo for Sally, or in the area where the box online where you can type, Tom helped Sally do it. He just sent her a copy, or sent Walt a copy of Sally's wording, essentially, and removed her name. And Walt talked to us a day or two later, and he says, I was able to apply. And so we think this is going to happen. We don't have any reason to not to. This is great. And so how this is relevant to you folks that haven't filed yet, your spouse is not deceased, and you hope they don't become deceased anytime soon. I mean, you say, well, how's this video relevant to me? Well, you need to learn about spousal benefits, period, if you're in the ready to file status. Sooner or later, either you or your spouse is going to deal with this from an estate planning issue, and you may very well have brothers, sisters, friends like this that are like Walt and Sally that had no idea this. They had no idea, and they knew that their deceased spouse's benefit was less than theirs, so they're thinking, how could I benefit from that? Not realizing about the restricted application and their benefit growing.
I will make a couple points too on the ex-spouse situation. So there's a couple rules around that. If you are divorced and you get remarried before age 60, this strategy is no longer going to be eligible for you. And so you need to be, you shouldn't make the marriage decisions around that, but just know that that's out there. In other words, if you were divorced many years ago, got remarried, and then that ex-spouse passed away, but you've been remarried, this likely is no longer an option for you. And then to Hans's point, there is specific language you want to use on the application. It's in a box. There's a section you can leave remarks to as part of the application. And so really get some help with that, because if you go get this wrong, they're going to file for the wrong benefit, and you're going to miss out on a window of benefits you could have been receiving. And so I think those are some things to keep in mind. And if you just have some questions and want to call us, you just reach out to us and we'll help walk you through what that might look like.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm Hans Scheil, CFP.
I'm Tom Griffith, CFP.
Thank you very much for listening.